Did you know that the good old Pokémon card game was released over 20 years ago now, and that the 20th anniversary of the Western releases was in April? Because I didn't. It completely slipped by me, and now that I have made that life-crushing mistake, I guess there's nothing left for me to do except cover it anyway. You know what they say, the next best time to do something is right now. On April of 2000, Pokémon trading card game was released for the Game Boy Color in America and Australia, and later in December for us in Europe, because of course. It was developed by the venerable Hudson Soft, and serves as an attempt to bridge the card game and the Mainline Series. And by Pokémon trading card game, I mean Pokémon trading card game, not the Pokémon trading card game, which is a trading card game based on the original Game Boy games that has since continued to receive updates, cards and mechanics, all of which has barely anything to do with this game. In Japan, it was called Pokémon Card Chibi, a name that certainly makes things less confusing. It was released 2 years before, in December of 1998, but the trading card game itself actually started in October of 1996, published by Media Factory. Wizards of the Coast then brought it overseas in January of 1999, and then continued to do so until the Pokémon Company took over in 2003, because Wizards accused Nintendo of stealing insider secrets or something and took them to court, and Nintendo just wouldn't have any of that. As for the game, it features the base set, which includes the cards that the game launched with, and the Jungle and Fossil expansions, from March and June of 1997 respectively. Some other special cards are also present, along with some completely original ones. The trading card game Game Boy Color game begins with an intro to the world of the trading card game, where special legendary cards are said to be inherited by those who have proven their worth. You play as a hopeful young man who loves collecting cards, and you head to Dr. Mason's laboratory to learn how to stop just collecting cards and to actually play the damned game. Dr. Mason researches cards, I guess, and arranges for you to have a guided match with one of his colleagues. After a short but very obnoxious tutorial, the doctor builds one of 3 decks for you to start with: Charmander and Friends, Squirtle and Friends, or Bulbasaur and Friends. And so, you start your journey to become the very best, like no one ever was. The island has 8 gyms, I mean 8 clubs, each focusing on a different Pokémon type. Defeating the gym leaders, defeating the club leaders earns you a badge, I mean a medal. And once you have all 8 medals, you can enter the Pokémon Dome to battle the Elite Four, the Grandmasters, and inherit the legendary cards. The leaders themselves have their own requirements for dueling them. Most just need you to defeat the regular members, but one dickweed, for example, requires you to have a certain number of cards, and another requires a number of medals before he stops being a douche, ignoring people talking to him. And speaking of douches, Ronald McBonald is here to serve as a rival, challenging you to a duel at inopportune moments. And unlike most rivals in the Mainline series, he isn't anything to scoff at, and if you lose, life moves on, unless you reload your save file, of course. Which you might want to do, because beating Ronald awards you some very rare stuff. Wait a minute, that card. At various points, the Challenge Hall will host competitions where you can earn other rare cards by winning several matches in a row. Similarly, you might find the mysterious Imakuni wandering around the clubs, being a creep and all that. There's also plenty of bookcases filled with information about how to play, or about certain cards and strategies, or even bits of lore about the island. I joked about the similarities, but the game really does mimic the Mainline games, not just with the clubs and Grandmasters, but also with the characters. Dr. Mason and Ronald are obvious stand-ins for Professor Oak and Green, but some of the clubs aren't far off from the ones in Kanto either. And if it feels like something is missing, worry not, because the sequel has you covered. Comparatively, this game is much smaller, but I prefer calling it more compact. There is less to explore, but plenty to discover in each individual area. The story plays second fiddle to the gameplay, but every character you can duel has their own portrait and deck, giving them a bit of personality. But it's about time I explain how this sucker actually plays. Naturally, it's an adaptation of the real-life trading card game, where players continuously draw from their decks and battle each other's Pokémon. At the start of a match, each player shuffles their deck and grabs 7 cards until they have at least one basic Pokémon. Depending on the match, up to 6 cards are taken and set as prizes. Players then place their basic Pokémon on the field. 1 is the active Pokémon and up to 5 can be set on the bench. Finally, a coin is flipped to decide who plays first. On each turn, the player draws 1 card and starts their actions. Pokémon belong to one of 7 types, more or less representing the original 15 types of Generation 1. These are Fire, Water, Grass, Electric, Fighting, Psychic, and Colorless. Unlike the Mainline series, moves use the Pokémon's type rather than their own, and all types have their own energy card. These are extremely important because you can only attach one every turn, and moves require a certain combination of energy. Each Pokémon also has a weakness, doubling the damage received, a resistance, lowering damage by 30 points, an HP value divided into chunks of 10 points, and a retreat cost. Retreating lets you swap your active Pokémon with one on the bench, in exchange for some energy cards attached to it. Starting with the second turn after being played, some Pokémon can also evolve, granting them new moves and HP maximum, along with removing status effects like paralysis and poison. A select few have a Pokémon power, granting special abilities. Some are passive and thus work automatically, and others can be activated from the menu during your turn. Levels technically exist too, but they are only there for flavor and for differentiating multiple versions of the same Pokémon. If the player has any trainer cards on their hand, these can also be used to cause all kinds of effects, like drawing more cards or healing a Pokémon. The objective is to knock out the opponent's Pokémon. Every time you do so, you pick one of your prizes, eventually winning if you get all of them or if the opponent has no Pokémon left on their bench. But you won't be winning balls without a decent deck, and that's where half the fun comes from. Whenever you win a match, you are given 1 or 2 booster packs containing 10 randomly selected cards. There are 4 kinds of packs, each with a different pool of cards to be found. While the cards included are random, most NPCs can be battled as much as you want and always give you the same type of booster pack. So if you're looking for a specific card, you can humiliate them over and over until you get it. And the more your collection grows, the deeper you can go into the nitty-gritty of deck building. Decks hold 60 cards, divided into Pokémon, Energy and Trainer cards. You can only have a maximum of 4 of a certain Pokémon, but otherwise it's fair game. If you want to forego trainer cards, that's up to you, but remember that every card has a purpose. Deck building is a balancing act, and the laws of probability reign supreme. The more you have of one card, the higher the chances of drawing it. Should you have basics and evolutions in equal number, or have more of either? If you have more than one of a specific evolution card, the more likely it is that you will be able to evolve its previous stage. But it also means sacrificing variety, and if luck isn't on your side, it doesn't matter how powerful your strategy can be. But there are powerful basic Pokémon that could do the job well too. Too many energy cards means running low on basic Pokémon to place on your bench, while too many Pokémon means running low on trainer and energy cards. And what about type coverage? The more different Pokémon types you include, the more types of energy cards you will need to include. But the more you spread it out, the less chances you have of drawing the right energy cards for the Pokémon you have in play. You could build a deck around colorless Pokémon, which can use any type of energy and have their own energy card that provides 2 pips instead of 1. But other types have their quirks too. Fire Pokémon, for example, tend to have powerful moves that require discarding energy cards, while electric Pokémon have various moves that deal additional damage, both to themselves and the opponents. And there are some really rad setups out there, my personal favorite being the classic legendary Zapdos trick. This card causes 30 points of damage to a random Pokémon when it's played, and its Big Thunder move deals 70 damage to a random one, easily knocking out most basic Pokémon. Make a deck with nothing but Zapdos, and exploit the fact that you are required to have at least one basic Pokémon on your hand at the start of a match. And of course, you can just reload your save as many times as you want, so even if it goes wrong at first, eventually you will get the perfect draw and demolish your opponent. That Zapdos strategy wouldn't fly well in a real-life competition where there is no going back. Ultimately, it's up to you to roll the dice and try to get probability on your side. And once you build a deck to be proud of, don't forget to save your deck on the deck saving machine that saves decks. And if you're an impatient person, you can use one of the pre-built decks if you have the right cards. You unlock a deck building machine with each medal, letting the club leaders taste their own medicine. But again, building your own deck is part of the fun, so I recommend you experiment with the mechanics for yourself. What puts a dent in all this is how so much of the gameplay is built around luck, and it's just as easy for a match to go horribly right as it is for it to go horribly wrong. I know that luck is just the way it goes with this kind of game, and it's that element of randomness that makes it so exciting sometimes, but when you score an easy victory because everything went wrong for your opponent, there isn't much satisfaction to be had. And when everything goes wrong for you, it makes losing just that much more frustrating. Preparation and strategy can only do so much when your fate can be decided by the flip of a coin. There's an element of luck to pretty much every game in the world, but in card games like these, there's no mechanical skill or chance manipulation to save your bacon when someone murders you by scoring heads every single turn. And like I said, the contents of booster packs are random, so who knows how much time it will take to get the cards you need for your pro gamer moves. Maybe if the game had some sort of card shop, this would be less of a problem, I guess. It's also a bit annoying that you can have 4 decks at one time but can't use the same cards on multiple decks at once. Like, if you have 2 of a certain trainer card, you can't have 2 in deck A and 2 in deck B at the same time. You'd think that this was done to prevent changing your deck in between multiple matches, but the game lets you do so anyway. You just have to keep them confined to a single deck. You can even save the game and reload to try again. And in the end, I guess it does leave you wanting more. This last playthrough was way shorter than I expected, clocking at about 7 hours and a half to reach the credits, and there isn't much to do after that. The story is also just an excuse to duel, not involving more than picking a club and challenging the NPCs there. There is no great adventure here, only a hyper-focus on establishing a base for something bigger. But having said all that, don't let it stop you from trying out Pokémon trading card game. Maybe it doesn't have the sense of wonder and exploration of the Mainline series, but this isn't just a cheap spin-off. Even in the artistic department it doesn't fall behind its peers. The music is catchy as balls and intense as hell when it needs to be, and those top-down visuals that put a ride on in my pants is up there with the best. It has some very nice adaptations of the artwork seen in the real cards, giving the game a stylized but authentic feel. I didn't keep up with the trading card game the same way I did with the Mainline series. I never had many cards, but even if I did, I wouldn't have anyone to play with. But that isn't a problem with a video game adaptation, and replaying it once again quickly reminded me of why I love it. It's simple enough to not overwhelm those who haven't played it in a while, but complex enough to keep you engaged. Pokémon Trading Card Game is a masterclass in how to translate a card game into video game form.